The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
All right, shifting over to the world of regulation, CFTC Chair Rostin Behnam is doubling down on Binance, with the agency alleging the crypto exchange offered unregistered crypto derivatives products and directed U.S. customers to evade compliance controls through the use of VPNs. Joining us to discuss this and more is Ron Hammond, Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association, a Washington-based crypto lobbying firm. Good morning there, Ron. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Zach. How are you?
I am doing well. Joining us from D.C., I presume?
Yes, sir. I know it's a little hard to see in the background there. We got the Capitol back over there in Navy Yard, where I'm located right here on the Hill. So never a morning day in D.C., I'll tell you that.
Looks lovely, and I hear the humidity is yet to kick in. So enjoy. Get outside today. All right, let's dig in. Let's go to this Bloomberg report about the CFTC chair, Rostin Behnam, kind of doubling down again on his attacks on Binance. He said, according to the Bloomberg report, at a Princeton University event, that Binance are, quote, not unsophisticated individuals. They are starting large companies and offering futures contracts and derivatives to U.S. customers, end quote. What do you make of these latest comments and the rhetoric that we're seeing out of the CFTC?
Yeah, of course. You know, the thing with the CFTC lawsuit with Binance is, first off, it's no stranger in DC. Binance is not well liked here. The two top names that come usually after FTX are Binance and Tether for quite some time. And so at the same time, we also see the CFTC going first here with their suit, which is important to highlight because we also know the DOJ, IRS, and SEC are also looking into Binance. So I think the shoe has yet to drop. This is just the first of likely many suits to come. And we know, at least here in DC, Binance has really been stepping up their game in terms of lobbying and advocacy efforts. It's probably too late, though. It looks like more like the cleanup crew, considering all that's happened in the past and some pretty damning evidence, especially in the CFTC lawsuit from this on Binance.
Yeah, some of those chat logs are a bit damning indeed. You mentioned the SEC. I know you guys are busy gearing up for a testimony from SEC Chair next week. SEC Chair Gary Gensler next week. What are you guys anticipating out of that hearing on Capitol Hill, and what can the crypto world expect to hear?
Well, Zach, the thing to highlight, especially with Gary Gensler in the House Financial Services Committee, is that it's been a year and a half at least since Gary Gensler has testified in front of that committee. He testified in the Senate in 2022, but he did not testify in the House at all. So think about all that's happened in the crypto market since October of 2021, which is pretty important to highlight in terms of everything that folks that Gensler is doing or not doing in terms of enforcement actions, the regulation by enforcement for some good players, not catching some of the bad actors after the fact. And then a lot of the rules he's been proposing, not just on things like custody, but also outside crypto, like ESG and stuff, which do go along the mainline Republican tropes. And I think the last thing to highlight is that usually in these hearings, you're going to have the party that has the administration in power, so in this case, the Democrats, really trying to play defense for their own. But there are a lot of folks on that committee on the Democrat side of the aisle who are not impressed with Gary Gensler on a multitude of fronts, but most notably on crypto for several folks like progressive Richie Torres, or for more moderate Josh Gottheimer, and several other ones down the line as well. So I think he's going to be in for a really tough hearing. There's supposed to be no time when this hearing ends, so it's going to go on for quite some time. And a lot of members are trying to get some licks in.
I sort of want to go back to the discussion here with Binance just for a second, because as you said, that their lobbyists are out there on Capitol Hill trying to protect their client, and that's understandable, but because they're paid to. But how do you differentiate yourself to those members of the hostile to crypto community, if you will, on the Hill? How do you differentiate what you're trying to do with what Binance is trying to do? Do they see the difference, or are they just saying, look, you guys are the same thing?
No, I'd say on Capitol Hill, there definitely is a noticeable difference here. You know, we have folks like Coinbase who have spent years on the ground educating policymakers about their business model and what they do. Even when I was a Hill staffer on Capitol Hill back in 2017, I met with Coinbase several times to learn about their product and services. Binance was nowhere to be seen. Most exchanges had no presence in DC. Obviously, that's changed a lot in the past 6 years, and we've seen a lot of engagement from stakeholders. But Binance came especially very late to the game here. And that's after a multitude of issues with potential money laundering accusations, other enforcement actions coming down the pipeline. And it seems like they're more playing cover here, or at least DC has been spending the 6+ years being educated to know, hey, we have a US company that's been complying with regulation or trying to comply with regulation with the SEC, like Coinbase, and yet still is served with a Wells notice. And they have taken every approach to try to be compliant and to try to engage. We have Binance who did the opposite. And the shoe may drop pretty soon, but they are also getting the same, unfortunately, lawsuits as well. And so this is the issue that we have in DC, is that no matter the approach you take, it seems like you're still going to be at the end of a Wells notice or enforcement action. And that's no way to regulate an industry. And a lot of folks we're talking to in the industry are saying, no matter the approach, it seems like we're still going to get hit. So why are we still spending our resources and time here in DC or the United States as a whole?
You know, you mentioned Circle here, and Elizabeth Warren, and also AOC, who has no problems using TikTok, even though it's basically malware. They sent a letter to BlockFi and Circle asking why they use Silicon Valley Bank. So, do you think that the questions about the banking sector, and specifically some of these banks that have collapsed and are no longer with us, do you think that that's going to translate into a long-term problem on Capitol Hill for crypto?
Of sorts. We're still trying to figure out right now if there is a coordinated federal campaign. We actually just launched a FOIA request today to the FHFA as well as the NYDFS, mostly around this issue of signature, trying to find out what happened and get to the matter of facts here. And I think the FOIA request is going to hopefully bring more of that situation to light. In terms of the Elizabeth Warren and AOC letter, a lot of folks in crypto understand it's been really hard to get a bank account in crypto before the Silicon Valley Bank situation. They've been having a hard time opening up at GSIBs like JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, so they've been going to community banks or folks like Signatures and Silvergate and others. And so right now, after the collapse of SVB and Signature and Silvergate, they're scrambling. They're having a hard time trying to find some bank accounts. At least from our membership, most of our folks have been able to get bank accounts elsewhere, but we're still trying to make sure that there's no political campaign or push from the FDIC or other regulators to try to shore off crypto entirely from the banking sector, because there have been rumors, but we need to see the evidence, and we're still sifting through that right now. Because if that does happen, that is a very big violation of the law, and I think there's going to be a lot of policymakers on both sides of the aisle who are going to be critical of that. Even if they don't believe in crypto, it's still a legally business and still regulated, and therefore they need to have access to bank accounts to make payroll. And if there is this effort to push them away, that is definitely illegal.
Yeah, Ron, I want to go in on that FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act request that you guys filed. You just announced that this morning. Some of the stuff that we heard from former Congressman Barney Frank, who was sitting on the board of Signature at the time it was taken over by regulators. Some of that stuff is pretty damning. But beyond some of those public statements, and maybe you're alluding to this process starting to begin, do you have any sort of evidence that suggests that this was a coordinated takedown that had more to do with the bank's involvement in crypto than with the health of its books?
See, I think the Barney Frank situation, I've talked to a lot of my Democratic colleagues who were around when he was chairman of the Financial Services Committee, and it's been a mixed view. Some folks say that he's trying to cover his end here on one extent, but the other time there are legitimate questions, and that's why we did that FOIA request around the Signature Bank closure especially. There is a lot of things that still need to be unveiled there. But at the same time, to your point about evidence, we know for a fact there are folks who have bank accounts at fully functioning banks who have been closed out recently. And the reasons, they vary, but there really haven't been a smoking gun in terms of, a certain regulator told us to do such. It's still been pretty, unfortunately, at least at this stage, they haven't given that evidence yet. But we're still sifting through because it's been happening at a pretty alarming amount. But again, I will want to say that there are folks who have lost bank accounts but have been able to get bank accounts at other institutions. But regardless, it's still frustrating to see at least the crypto industry, which has come so far, which has been around for quite some time, is still having this hard problem of getting bank accounts. I mean, I dealt with this when I was on Capitol Hill as well with the marijuana industry, where they are legal businesses, but they could not get bank accounts because of the various federal laws surrounding marijuana, as well as some banking laws as well. So it's been a problem for quite some time, unfortunately.
I mean, do you think that the regulators actually care? I know for us it's very important, but when we look at the overall market cap of crypto, it's still smaller than many companies on the S&P 500. Do you think that they actually do care whether or not they lose crypto as an industry in the United States?
We already are losing crypto in the United States. There was an Electric Capital study that came out, I believe it was 2 months ago, that showed that we went from 40% of the world's blockchain developers to 29%. And that's in the past, recent years, actually. And I think if you've seen anything in 2022 and the action from the regulators, I don't think that number of 29% is going to go up anytime soon. A lot of folks we're talking to are saying, rather than trying to start in the United States and move elsewhere, we're just going to start elsewhere and build our projects. And we're seeing that in well-regulated countries like France, UK, Singapore, and others. So there is a pretty notable hostility recently towards crypto in DC, and we're trying to make sure we rectify that by pointing out bad actors like Binance in this situation, but at the same time showcase good actors like Coinbase who have really gone above and beyond in terms of trying to comply with the regulators and are still met with a Wells notice. And that's unfortunately a pretty damning situation that we have to thread that needle. But I think we're going to make some good progress. I think you're going to see a lot of updates in the next 2 weeks from Congress that's going to A, check the regulators, but B, also come out with some legislation that I think for the first time in quite some time has a chance to move. And that's going to be really critical for these next 9 months.
Yeah, last question here, Ron. I know it's been a very hectic couple of months in DC. A lot of shoes have already dropped. You mentioned that more shoes may be in the process of falling soon. What should we be looking out for in terms of these next big headlines on the regulatory enforcement front?
So on the enforcement front, they are pretty close to the chest with when those come out. I mean, I know we do have some inklings like the Binance situation with DOJ and IRS and SEC having open investigations. So we'll see about that. Again, I mentioned the Coinbase Wells notice. I'm sure several other folks recently have gotten Wells notices from the SEC, but just aren't as public. Coinbase decided to take a public stance to fight. But then I will also say you're going to see legislation likely coming really, really soon, potentially even next week, from folks like Lemus Gillibrand, who said about mid-April we're going to see some legislation. We're going to be seeing a stablecoin hearing next week as well. As you may recall, that was a bipartisan effort that actually contradicted a lot of what the SEC has been doing recently in the stablecoin realm. And then finally, market structure. I think we're going to see some movement from the House especially on what does it look like with the CFTC's role in the crypto space. We see the SEC really playing big dog here, but at the same time, the CFTC also has some teeth as well. And it looks like they want to make sure we have a clear jurisdictional line. And the good news, there's bipartisan support for that. And again, I want to say there's a chance that we have some movement, especially in the House in the next couple months.
Very interesting. We'll be definitely watching that closely. Thanks so much, Ron Hammond. That right there is the Blockchain Association's Director of Government Relations. Thanks so much for joining us. And you can check out Ron's colleague, Kristen Smith, at Consensus in Austin, Texas, in less than 2 weeks. Oh my, it's coming up quickly. We hope to see you down there.